What is up, down and sideways, you truly fantastic individuals? Welcome back to another epi of League Unlock. Eric and Mark here with you beauties, here to wrap up the preseason player rankings. Some might say we've saved the best for last when we're talking a little bit of LCK, who obviously didn't have the most moves, but definitely had the most drama-filled offseason. Yes, we're talking about Zeus and Doran, the swap heard round the globe.
Oh, the LCK. It's always fun to stop in with every other region, of course, but this is the one where I feel like the power is there and you gravitate towards this league when you are considering what everybody else has to go up against, because you know the final boss usually is that LCK team awaiting for you. In the last couple of years, that has certainly been true with the T1 dynasty, but that is no longer, as you said, with Zeus leaving T1. So time to take a fresh look into where people are and where we're ranking them in the LCK.
And we got to start in that top lane, right in the heart of the drama. Zeus going to this new look Hanwha team, and despite all the drama around it, people being upset that he's leaving T1, that he didn't want to return, yada, 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 you know he's going to be looking to prove himself, and on this Hanwha Life lineup, I'm hard-pressed to not see him hit the ground running in that top spot.
There's nobody in the LCK that has to prove themselves more, despite having accomplished so much, like Zeus in this situation this year. And thankfully for him, he's in a great situation with the rest of Hanwha Life that does nothing to really paint the picture about him individually, though. So let's take a look at that and what he's done with T1. The play that he has been able to bring in the biggest of moments for T1 is the number one thing to talk about, that team fighting ability that he has to take over in these big moments. The clutch factor is there for him. You do also need to realize and weigh in there have been some rough patches with him in the last little bit as well. So there is a bit of a balance picture to figure out on which is the true Zeus and who is going to show up on the day, because it can either be the most dominating performance possible or it can be a liability for your squad. More often than not, the dominant side is what appears, and I'm betting that we're going to see a heck of a lot of that supported by the rest of Hanwha Life this year.
And I think, again, the guy who's getting the short end of the stick from the community, as we've talked about multiple times, is Doran, but putting him any lower than third on this list, and again, we're kind of projecting where we think they'll be towards the end of this first split are these rankings. Keen still seems like the safe guy, despite getting less resources than ever on this stacked Gen G lineup. He was incredibly consistent all throughout last year for them in that top side. But yeah, Doran in that 3 spot. If you're putting him lower, it just kind of feels like disrespect.
It is, and it's especially one of those type of things where I think then if you are and you're disrespecting that type of way, and maybe not on purpose, it just is simply, I think, the evaluation, the value of what you're valuing in that player and what he can do, and the mistakes that you are taking against him in some of these big moments, which yes, there are for Doran, is where you're finding that type of equation. The biggest thing for me here, and yes, repping the T1 jersey, of course, so I understand.
Totally unbiased.
A little conflicted here with Doran, and I'm hoping for the best for him. The question is whether it's going to be a 3-headed monster at the top of the top lane in the LCK with Zeus, Keen, and Doran being terrifying things to go up against, or is it going to be that 2-horse race where you do have those 2 power players in Zeus on Hanwha Life and Keen, who I think, again, like Doran, not to the same degree for the same type of reasons, but is getting disrespected by people, just how good and how impactful he was for Gen G last year and things that went right for this team. I'm waiting. I'm holding out hope, but I believe that we are going to see that 3-headed monster with Doran putting together a great year for T1.
And outside of those top 3 is definitely where the drop-off happens for these top laners heading into this year. I'm believing, and as we'll get through this list, in this rebranded DN freaks coming in, who are obviously Kwangdong. Dudu has a star-studded, maybe not star-studded, a good roster around him. And then we're buying into the hype of the rookie for Siwoo coming in for D+. And by the way, back-to-back Dudu, Siwoo, sounds like you're starting to sing Silver Scrapes. That's a hilarious back-to-back.
Maybe if we're using LCS Commissioner Mark Z on the vocals for that,
yeah.
Sounds a little bit like that. I like the recognition for Dudu. This is one of those situations where I think he is at a bit of a crossroads in his career. Can you take that next step forward to be more of a marquee player for your organization, or are you still going to be kind of one of these guys that gets lost in the shuffle around this middle tier? Siwu, as you mentioned, is that rookie for D plus Kia, and that we are looking to see what he can bring to the LCK and the type of potential that we have heard about him throughout this time, and even checking in down with your boy, the Lord himself, Mr. Morgan, hanging around here.
Yeah, and listen, had a great Kespa Cup. Did the Bros, who obviously, made their run through it. But Siwu, incredibly impressive because the challenger team for D Plus loses Thanatos to C9, and they immediately get the best top laner in the LCK again, as voted by the league, with Siwu. So really excited to see that top side of the map for D Plus Kia. The ceiling is incredibly high for him alongside his buddy Lucid in that jungle. Speaking of the Jungle Boys, as we rumble into this, again, new meta, new look era at the start of the year when you're cooking up new picks, nobody in their right mind is going to bet against a guy like Canyon to cook up what's going to be the strongest in the meta. And even with Peanut getting a new toy in Zeus in the top lane, it's pretty hard to go against Canyon for the top spot.
It's hard. It's close, though. Closer than I think it's ever been at the very top of the LCK. And it's an interesting one because this one, not like the top lane where we're having to make, is it going to be the 3-horse race or whatever? I think we are guaranteed a 3-horse race at the very least in the jungle when we are talking about it. Your front runner, your favorite is going to be Canyon at the very top of it. What he can do with a lineup like Gen G, we've already seen it last year, really was erasing a lot of the doubts, a lot of the lingering questions people might have had after the last couple of years with D plus Kia. To see his impactful role on a championship caliber team like Gen G reestablish that for a lot of people. And I think one of the biggest factors that, again, we continue to see is if you get in a best of series, this is someone that is a game changer. That is the one that can dial it up and say, okay, this hasn't worked. This is meta. That's not it. Bring me this thing. I'm going to make it a power pick. I'm going to make it something they might need to ban later on, whatever type of thing. And we've seen that have a factor for Gen G. Peanut, I think, has been an incredible growth and journey throughout his career to where we are now as this mentoring veteran as he is with Hanwha Life. And as you mentioned, getting that new toy in Zeus, I think is going to be a fantastic option for him to go into that top side and get a lead for Hanwha Life. Owner hanging out at number 3 is the scary horse for me because this is one that has the capabilities to run away with it and jump out in front of both Canyon and Peanut this year and what he can do. But I think it's cautious in knowing that there are going to be, of course, like they have been at every other point with him, some ups and downs throughout the year and where you're finding that effectiveness and where the meta read is for T1. So I'm waiting on that one with Owner at a cautious and conservative number 3. But these are my top 3 in the LCK.
You got to take into account this is LCK Owner. We're not at Worlds anymore. The Worlds buff's gone. We're coming back to the LCK, even though we've got the word Cup. The LCK Cup, Summoner's Cup. Maybe the buff is like 50% for Owner coming into this year. But outside of those big powerhouse top 3, we got the youth movement in the jungle. Because you look at the bottom half of this list, Piosik, Cuz, Raptor, Juhan, and Sylvie. These are all guys who have been around to various degrees, but you almost know what to expect from them, which is why guys like Lucid and the young rookie Hambak coming in for the Bros, who had an incredible Kespa Cup run, and Lucid heading into his second year. The ceiling for these two young guys, if they get close to it, I think 4-5 is a safe spot for them.
I'm biased here. I'm gonna give a little bit of extra love to Hambak because it reminds me of when I was in Korea. One of the things on the McDonald's extra value menu is called the Hambak burger, and man, I'm telling you, you go to Korea, get yourself one of those. That's
probably what it's based on, for sure. Yeah, McDonald's. Yeah,
I'm hoping it's based on that one, because if it is, my man is a delicious treat for the rest of the LCK, just like his namesake in that burger. I think that they're very excited about what he's going to do, but even more so, the story for me has got to be about Lucid and his next year and the development that we can hopefully see from him. I think there was so much potential, so much promise that you can see in this player, but still understanding there's a lot to grow. There's a lot to learn, a lot to catch up to the speed of just how things work and what you're expected to be at in a preparation level at the LCK. I think another year off season integrated in as well. Now he's going to be part of the group that is welcoming in a rookie and Siwu in the top side. I'm looking for Lucid to have a big year.
Yeah, and especially with Beryl coming back, gleaning that veteran presence, that game knowledge that we know Beryl has is only going to hopefully accelerate the development of both Siwoo and then Lucid in his second year to hopefully avoid that sophomore slump that we've seen take over so many players over the years. But definitely those two young guys for me are the most exciting potential for the junglers to look at heading into this year. Guides of the mid lane, always the trickiest one in the LCK to do because there seems to be a rotating Final Four, Elite Four to talk about in the LCK, and it kind of swaps in maybe one of the guys to come in. But there's also some young guys that we're expecting. But again, as is mainly the theme on this list, is Humble Life and Genji being near the top. I can't accept any arguments against Chovy and Zeka being 1-2 and probably staying 1-2 till the end of the split.
I think there's maybe a world, depending on how much of a fanboy, how much of a lover of the unkillable Demon King, on where you want to put him on this list. So I'll understand and accept some of those conversations. But I think, again, I do agree that it is going to be Chovy and Zeka at the very forefront for me in the LCK. Chovy, it's hard because, again, you're going to have a lot of the doubts and questions, Choky and you know, criticizing the performance on the international stage. But you take a look at the numbers, the impact that was felt throughout the domestic seasons in the LCK this past year. There's no question it has to be Chovy at the very top of this mid lane ranking and where you're going through. And then, frankly, the second half of the summer split last year throughout that playoff run and extending to Worlds, Zeka has to be someone that you are considering in that top option in the LCK. The way that he can explode and really take over for this Hanwha Life team and lead the charge is something that you're talking about. It's hard because, again, you know, we got the T1 sweater on, and I want to be talking about my guy Faker and going on about the incredible clutch plays and the factor that he still brings in. But you have to recognize we're seeing that almost exclusively on the Worlds and international stage. We have not quite seen that level of performance, that clutch factor necessarily in the LCK for T1, whether that's a factor talking about the DDoS situation that continues to plague this organization, you know, and whether it's the rising competition in the LCK at that ultra elite level in the mid lane. I don't know what the exact equation is, but for me, Faker in the LCK is finding himself outside of those top two spots, which is something you would never say when you're talking about the clutch plays, what we've just seen from him on the World's level.
And I know seeing him even outside top 3 in that 4 spot is going to warrant maybe some trucks showing up at our houses for this one. But again, go back to summer. Before the amazing Worlds run, nobody was talking about Faker as a top 3 mid laner in the LCK. This is early season. This guy, it's a long year. He's got to coast a little bit. He's got to pace himself. And with Doran coming in, Faker is the ultimate teammate. I feel like he might even take a further step back to make sure that Doran is comfortable in this new environment. We're looking individually, specifically at mid laners, and a guy like BDD on a KT roster lineup that has Doc Dom as the AD carry. BDD is going to have to do a lot more of the heavier lifting than Faker's going to have to do on T1, and we just saw BDD have one of his best splits in years last year.
I'm thinking, and this is a tough one because both of these guys are going to benefit if this is something, but I'm thinking maybe, again, Azir, of course, will find his way into the meta. And
he's
if
inevitable.
He is, BDD is going to be certainly one of the big utilizers of that champion in the LCK, as you said, highlighting that he is going to be in a situation where, again, he needs to be that impactful God-level player for KT roster to have a factor in the important matches or set up important matches in the LCK as we get closer to the championship level. BDD has got to find himself here. For me, I'm rolling with him at 4. I'm biased. I'll take that. I'll take that star, asterisk, whatever it is that I'm throwing Faker ahead of him in that situation. I like that you do bring up the course. Yes, there is definitely a path where he takes more of that back seat. We've seen that with players like Kana and Zeus getting that featured option, getting that more so that support and identification of being that leading charge of damage or whatever it's going to be. I think that the reason why my copium that I'm breathing in here for Faker to be at number 3 is looking at that world championship and kind of maybe hoping that's turning that corner, that realization of where the game has evolved to, champions have evolved to, and what Faker individually can do that nobody else can do, of course, is those big clutch plays, and how he was able to utilize it with the Galio, the Ari, of course, the Silas, these big moments. I think that he can find some more of that magic and bring that play style, that play factor to the LCK.
No question he can still bring that magic. I just think it's coming later in the year. He's got to sit back in the chair, kind of rest a bit, recharge still. And what these games, when do they matter? Okay, yeah. Call me when there's playoffs. Call me when it's an international event on the line, because there is no question that he can get back to that level with the flip of a switch whenever he needs to. Let's roll on to that bot lane where this is, I mean, mid lane's always stacked in the LCK, but AD carry coming into this year with the return of Ruler, even by losing Pays. Woo! This top 6 basically looks pretty nasty heading over into the LCK, and almost opposite to Faker. With Doran coming in, Zeus leaving, I feel like we are going to see the change where Guma says, I am T1. I know Faker is really T1, but Guma's saying, I'm ready to take that next step and be an absolute elite player, and I think him and Kyria have one of their best splits, best years that we've seen this year.
You're right about that read on Gumayushi, especially with the way things have fallen out since Zeus left to Hanwha Life. Doran comes over. Guma's been part of one of the biggest parts of that welcoming crew for Doran to join the group, keep morale high, and focus into this next year. And especially Guma being that one that we've always talked about, being in that pipeline of who would take over from Faker and T1. Guma's kind of the guy, outside of obviously the incredible talent and potential that Zeus offered on the team. You've looked at Guma's personality and the way that he is really identified as a T1 member to take that next charge. I like that he's also going to face an unprecedented challenge within the region, having this Avengers Assemble of all the great ADCs around the world really returning to the LCK. I think hopefully this provides maybe a little bit of insight in where we've been maybe negative or down on some of the other regions and their ADC pools, knowing the pool that has been assembled in the LCK is so strong. And Guma, at the very least for me, hoping he's at the very top of it.
He's got some contests going on. Obviously, Viper was in fine form last year, and having him ahead of Ruler down to that 3 spot, obviously a couple of reasons. Well, number one, Viper had a better year last year than Ruler if you're looking at head-to-head performances, and then you got to take into account it's Ruler coming back to this region. I think a lot, especially Guma and Viper, are going to want to prove that, hey, this is our region now. You left, we run this, and you combine that with Ruler. He's playing with a rookie support that he hasn't played with before. He's going to have to ease into things before he's vying for that top spot again.
And again, we all know things, even just at the pure level, things operate a little bit differently throughout the games in the LCK than they do in the LPL. The opportunities, the aggression that you will be provided is going to be an adjustment that Ruler needs to change back to, whether that's simply going to be like, oh yeah, this is how it is, and gets right back into it, or if it's going to take a little bit more time. You know, time will tell for this situation with him in the LCK. But man, we're talking about that at the very top, and you're looking at those are your 3, and it doesn't stop from there when we're talking about the LCK ADCs.
Yeah, I mean, you go 4, 5, 6. Berserker coming back. Well, actually, never actually played in the LCK, but coming back to Korea in that 4 spot with the Freaks. Aiming had an incredible run at times last year with D+. And even Hype, we just saw a fantastic Kespa Cup run from him as the new rookie coming in. 4, 5, and 6 LCK AD carries would be like number 1 in the LEC and LCS.
It's incredibly intimidating when you start lining them through like that, and especially considering that you have a prospect type player like Hype at this high up from what we have seen early on, and knowing again how history works in the LCK, there is bound to be 2 or 3 star players show themselves even on not a playoff type of roster. And I'm putting it right away. Hype is going to be someone that is going to be capable of pushing into that territory.
And when you transition to the supports alongside these AD carries, the theme remains for T1. I know at times last year we were talking about both Delight and Lahans ahead of Kyria, but if Guma's getting propped up and kind of puffing out his chest, you know Kyria's going to be right there alongside him. And similar to Canyon, when you're cooking up new picks in the meta, number 1 on your support is definitely Kyria.
It has to be Kyria. Now, there's a factor in understanding whether it is a full actual, this is something we really believe in, or if it's just a kind of a for fun experiment, because we've seen a sprinkling of that from Kyria and some of the champions that he has chosen at times due to the luxury that T1's record can provide. But last couple of years, they've been squeaking by. So I don't know if that record and that type of freedom is going to be there for Kyria. But yes, what he can do in his playmaking has to be at the very forefront of the supports in the LCK. You saw that immediately through that Worlds run for T1 last year, in the way that he was able to elevate his gameplay from where it had been throughout the various points in the year, and how much of a factor that he was able to be. And one of my favorite things about Kyria that has been able to develop over the course of his career is that forgive and forget mentality. Make a mistake, and it can be as crucial and painful as it is, but move on, move to the next play, make it matter in that next one. And that type of ability is something that doesn't always come through in a professional player. So to see that with him, and to be at that unreal skill set that he's already at, the ceiling keeps growing for my man.
And we're also expecting to see a slow return to form for Beryl. This is the guy who's not going to be leading supports in KDA at any point throughout the seasons, but he's going to bring up the power level of D plus Kia as a whole. But individually, still got him behind Lehens, even though Lehens is kind of the way of BDD, going to be on a team that's probably underperforming in Nongshim to a much higher level than KT Rolster. But I'm expecting a lot of people to be saying, poor Lehens stuck in ELO hell this split.
I think we're going to see that as well. There's going to be certainly the creativity, the wackiness that Lehens is known for in what his champion pool can be in the bottom lane. We're going to see that, and he's going to be a nightmare for a couple of these teams that do have different type of aspirations, whether that is the international level and being at that ultra elite in the LCK, or just trying to make it into a playoff tier. I'm telling you, there's going to be some of you that go, man, if we just didn't lose to Lehens in that stupid blitzcrank or whatever, the Singed, whatever it's going to be, he's going to be a nightmare for some of these guys. But I think, again, he's on a little bit of a redemption tour himself from the highs that he has been at previously.
And, of course, the other question is just how quickly Duro adapts to being on an absolutely star-studded, stacked Gen G roster. Is he going to be scapegoated? Is he going to develop even quicker playing alongside somebody like Ruler and all these veterans? But definitely the ceiling is there for him. It's just a matter of how quickly he gets comfortable and how he deals with the pressure that's being on a Worlds and LCK contending team in Gen G. So he's going to be a fun story to follow throughout the year. But that is it today for Liga Unlock. Eric and Mark here with you, beautiful people. As always, thank you so much for hanging out, and we will catch you on that flippity flip.